Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Monday everybody. I hope you had a lovely weekend and are ready for a productive week ahead. Yesterday, Sunday, January the 8th, after almost 3 years of some of the tightest border restrictions in the world, China started receiving its first international travelers on quarantine-free visits. Early Sunday morning, flights from Canada, Singapore and New Zealand were among the first to arrive at the Guangzhou, Shenzhen and Shanghai airports. By Sunday afternoon, 11 quarantine-free flights from Doha, Dubai, Jakarta, New York, Seoul and other cities arrived in Guangzhou. We remember that last month China announced that as of January 8th, visitors to China need only to present a negative PCR test result from the previous 48 hours in order to enter the country. Limits on the number of international flights were also dropped. According to the so-called 10th version of Epidemic Prevention and Control Guidelines for Airlines and Airports, published by the Civil Aviation Administration last Thursday, international flight crews and related personnel from Sunday too will no longer have to go through quarantine when they enter the Chinese mainland. The new rules also drop the requirement for flight crews to wear protective gear while overseas. The Chinese internet has been awash with videos of families reunited after 3 years of separation. Due to the timing of the easing, many family members can now return to China in time for China's Spring Festival celebrations. Video of Shanghai Pudong Airport dismantling its COVID-19 prevention and isolation facilities at the International Arrivals Hall was also being shared widely online, likely in a celebratory spirit. Flights are now expected to surge in the coming weeks and months from the low levels of the zero-COVID years. China's busiest airport, Shanghai Pudong International, saw just 1.6 million passengers in 2022, compared to almost 40 million in 2019. During the zero-COVID days, the industry was hit hard, and the government had to throw a lifeline to the sector. Over 200 billion yuan in emergency loans have been handed to airlines and airports across the country over the last 3 years. From January 12th, this Thursday, international flights can directly land in Beijing again. Meanwhile, according to state media, 8 land ports connecting China with neighboring countries, including Russia, North Korea and Vietnam, also reopened yesterday. And of course, the mainland Hong Kong border also opened. Local authorities said around 28,000 people had crossed the 3 main land border crossings with neighbouring Shenzhen in both directions as of 4 p.m. on Sunday. Hong Kong has limited daily crossings to around 60,000 in each direction. Its high-speed rail link to mainland China is expected to be re-established this week too, as the territory goes through a phased reopening. An expected rush of mainlanders into Hong Kong is being seen as a much-needed boost for the territory's battered economy, which is projected to have shrunk by 3.2% in 2022. Analysts forecast retail sales growth of between 10 and 20% this year, after a likely 20% decline in 2022. Meanwhile, at a forum in Shanghai over the weekend, prominent Chinese epidemiologist Zhang Wenhong told the audience that China will soon be in sync with the rest of the world as COVID-19 becomes an endemic disease, expressing, quote, "Mainland China has also entered the first wave of the peak of the pandemic. As more medical resources become available, we will transition to an endemic stage. It is likely to become like the flu and become a seasonal epidemic." End quote. Now, while we're on this theme and before we move on to the next development, one piece of housekeeping. This coming Saturday, there will not be an episode of China Update. At that time, if all goes to plan, I will be on a flight home to New Zealand. It's been a long 3 years. Okay, next up, we are getting yet more signals from officials that Beijing is indeed wrapping up its 2-year crackdown on China's technology industry, which has hurt giants like Alibaba Group, Tencent and others. Guo Shuqing, party secretary of the People's Bank of China, China's central bank, and former chairman of the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission, expressed at an event over the weekend that, quote, "The special campaign to rectify 14 internet platform companies' financial businesses is basically complete, with few remaining issues to resolve." End quote. He added that further supervision of the sector will be normalized and support will be given to help platform companies play a bigger role in job creation and global competition. While there have been several signals from Beijing in recent months, especially after the Central Economic Work Conference in December, which pledged support for the so-called internet platform industry and called for the rapid development of the digital economy, this is the first explicit statement from a senior official that the crackdown is coming to an end. Chinese financial media has also reported similar signals. Quote, Caixin learned from multiple sources that the last regulatory meeting convened by the central bank and 14 leading platform companies was held September 20th, during which officials indicated that no more restrictive policies would be issued for the sector. End quote. We remember that the crackdown began back in October 2020 as Beijing regulators accused technology giants of monopolistic and other abusive behavior. There were also concerns that some of the firms were getting too politically powerful. Fines, tough new regulations, and direct involvement in internal company policies were par for the course during this time. Almost every player in the industry, every major player, was sucked into the storm, with the most prominent episodes including the suspension of Ant Group's IPO and the delisting of ride-hailing giant Didi from the New York Stock Exchange. The regulatory storm, combined with other considerations, triggered a large-scale sell-off of Chinese technology stocks. From heights just before the crackdown, China's tech stocks have seen 70% of their market value in Hong Kong and the United States wiped out. Next up, a large-scale labor protest in Chongqing. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button. I rely on the community to keep these episodes financially sustainable, so for anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep these updates up, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. As always, thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. Footage shared online from over the weekend appears to show moderately sized groups of workers clashing with riot police at a pharmaceutical plant in the southwest megacity of Chongqing. The footage includes scenes of people throwing objects at riot police, smashing property, and people yelling and demanding their money back. Due to the sensitivity of incidents like mass protests in China, it's difficult to confirm facts on the ground. However, initial reports suggest that the protests are part of a labor dispute at the site rather than a political protest. It is believed that the protests started after a group of workers were fired without notice at a plant manufacturing COVID test kits. Such a move makes sense as the huge industrial fit-out for making COVID tests during the zero COVID years is now largely not needed. Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post reports that one internet user, who claimed to be a temporary worker at the factory, said in an online post that workers were asked to leave the production line on Friday morning and assemble at a square, where they were told to leave early for the Lunar New Year holidays. When asked about their wages, they were told they would be distributed within days, but only to workers with a contract, writes the outlet. This worker wrote that many workers were not getting clear answers regarding compensation, and then, quote, thousands of people in the area started to destroy test supplies and products, end quote. It appears that discussion of the protest was censored on major platforms by Sunday. Several high-profile violent labor protests have erupted in recent months, with the most notable, of course, being the November protests at Foxconn's Zhengzhou iPhone factory, an event that got a lot of international media attention at the time. Labor agitation is nothing new in China. It's just that most incidents of violence or protests are not reported on domestically. But we should note that these labor protests are localized, small to moderately sized, leaderless, and not part of a wider movement of any kind. Thus, in their current form, they are of almost no threat to the state. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a lovely day wherever you are, and I will see you all tomorrow.